Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. This week's spotlight is another fan favorite who many of you have been requesting, Odetta Wanderlust Incarnate. Although she doesn't necessarily line up against any current events particularly well, I wanted to revisit Odetta due to her popularity. Odetta released during April's Thunder and Splendor banner as the 4-star focus under Albert. Due to her simultaneous release with Albert and the release of Alfonse the following month, there are lots of comparisons to draw between the light swordswoman Odetta and her competition. But, in the words of Odetta, I am me, and that is enough. Her charming personality and search for new worlds set her apart from a character standpoint, and her utility and versatility do so from a gameplay one. Odetta is an attack type unit, meaning her stat spread favors strength. She shares this in common with every other light sword wielder. In Odetta's case, however, her skills and abilities offer more than just straightforward damage. She can also buff her teammates' strength, heal, and debuff her foe's defense. More on that soon. With Odetta's sword comes the Dragon Haste co-ability, which is largely negligible in most game modes. On the other hand, swords do have strong basic attacks and excellent force strikes. Their force strikes diminish the overdrive gauge quickly, are fast to aim, and easy to spam repeatedly. Most swords prefer to combo by using 3 basic attacks into 1 force strike. This allows them to skip the long jumping animation on their 4th hit. This does carry some risk since accidentally using the force strike after the jump starts leads to a very slow and weak combo. Odetta is fortunate in that her preferred combo is actually slightly easier to use. 2 basic attacks into a force strike instead of 3. Odetta's skill SP costs line up so that she can charge her first skill after 4 combos of this type, and her second skill after 10 such combos. Those numbers may sound high, but remember that it's a lot shorter to execute 2 hits into a force strike than it is to do the full-length jump/slash combo using a sword unit. Her short combo also means fewer mistakes. You should be less likely to accidentally reach the jump slash. I alluded to Odetta's skills having convenient SP costs and to some of the mini effects they provided, so let's look at those next. In some ways, Odetta reminds me a lot of Gala Cleo. Both are versatile units with veritable Swiss Army knives for kits. Odetta's ratios aren't as pushed, of course, but she's still great. Odetta's first skill is Liberty Slash. This deals a fairly low 604% total damage in a line ahead, but has a chance to debuff enemy defense by 5% for 10 seconds with 40% base chance. The damage isn't great, but the skill can hit multiple targets, and, with any luck, that defense debuff provides team support. This skill is also very quick to charge, meaning lots of chances to trigger the debuff in a given quest. However, I should also note that it's worse in expectation than many slower to use second skills that debuff defense with higher accuracy. For example, there's less than an 80% chance you'll land at least 1 debuff in 3 uses of this skill, which is about how long it would take to charge a second skill with 100% proc rate. The upside is that if you're lucky, Odetta can string together a ton of debuffs in a row. Odetta's second skill is Freedom Ring. This heals her and nearby allies for a sizable amount, then buffs their strength by 15% for 15 seconds. The real gem here is the strength buff, but incidental healing should not be underestimated in modes like Astral Raids or potentially future High Dragon Trials either. One weaker aspect of this skill though is that the AI won't use it just for the buff if everyone is healthy. How frequently you can safely group up near your allies in battle will also affect how powerful this ultimately is. In terms of the amount healed, recovery potency is basically a percentage that correlates to how big a heal is, and Odetta has 60% on this skill. For comparison, most healers have 108% recovery potency on their primary healing skills, like Thaniel, Cleo, Hildegard, and Loendu. So Odetta's heal is roughly half as effective, or worse when considering she won't have the innate recovery potency passives of most healers, and she may or may not have the applicable staff co-ability in her team comp. Still, in fights where there's lots of chip damage, every little bit helps. The heal and buff also work across party lines for raids. One of Odetta's abilities, unlockable if she's promoted to a 5-star, is buff time of 20%. This pushes Freedom Ring from a 15-second strength buff into an 18-second one. Elisanne, Gala Cleo, and Melody still top the charts for team buffs, but Odetta is probably the 4th strongest. Impressive considering her buff is on her 2nd skill rather than her 1st one. Odetta's other 2 abilities are also good. HP 70% equals strength of 10% is just a really solid and universal passive. It helps that Odetta can heal herself to maintain it too, if she needs to. Poison res of 100% is more of a coin toss, but it's not awful either. In principle, poison is a far more annoying affliction than curse, which is the other common resistance for light units. Poison is present in Shadow IO and the 2 Manticore Void battles. At its worst, poison could be made strong enough that it reduces units to 1 HP every time it ticks, and there are fewer sources available to cleanse or block poison fully, mainly Felicia and a Solitary Light. However, Curse is speculated to be used by High Zodiac once that's released. It's unclear how punishing Curse would be in that fight, considering one of the best light healers, Hildegard, can cleanse it. In addition, prints like Heavenly Holiday and the aforementioned A Solitary Light exist that can block it outright on any light adventurer if needed. Using prints like that would cost Odetta in terms of her damage, but it might still work just fine. It's simply not known how much curse res will matter, but for now, it's hardly relevant for most content. And speaking of content, well, it's time to show off some Odetta gameplay. Odetta is multi-dimensional, but with limited gear slots, it can be hard to boost every aspect of her kit at once, and trying to do too much at once is a real concern. So while this battle footage plays, let's discuss build ideas for Odetta. The first area I want to cover is weapons, since they're probably the most clear-cut in Odetta's case. The 5-star Core Light Sword, Zex's End, gives Odetta a decent attack skill on top of the best raw stats. The skill is probably best held for iframing, since Odetta wants to be charging her other 2 skills through basic attacks and force strikes. But the stats alone make this sword superior to any alternative, and as usual, it costs a lot to craft as a result. Twinkling Sand, in particular, are more precious than ever now, with more demanding content like MG around. If you decide not to invest in Odetta with a 5-star core sword, you could also opt for the 4-star. Astral Edge's skill is slow to charge, but it heals the user and grants an HP regen buff. This weapon is best suited for a budget build, AI-controlled Odetta in a harder survival-based mode like a facility event or astral raids, and it's generally weaker than Zex's End, even then. Another budget option if you were around during the Fire Emblem crossover is Volkvanger, but its passive is at odds with Odetta's own. For void weapons, Odetta has access to Dull Res on Abandoned Roar and Fury Penetrator on Plasma Ingot. In general, these weapons aren't worth crafting since they're only suited for easier void fights like the Obsidian Golem and Raging Manticore, although I did craft Plasma Ingot for this footage just to ease my solo clear. Odetta's preferred dragons are about as obvious as her preferred weapons, but there are some nice synergies to point out. Odetta wants as much strength as possible, and right now, Cupid provides that. As it so happens, Cupid also grants a massive critical rate buff to the entire team through his skill, and the buff duration does get extended by Odetta's buff time ability. This makes Odetta one of the best users of Cupid around. Cupid also happens to heal on his buff skill, just like Odetta does on hers. The best alternative to Cupid is Gilgamesh, followed by Lindworm, with the latter being easiest to max Unbind due to being a 4-star. Takamikazuchi doesn't work especially well with Odetta, seeing as how her Force Strikes can shred through the enemy's overdrive bar fast, resulting in less overdrive Punisher uptime overall. Other dragons like High Jupiter, Liger, or Halloween Silk could serve to balance Odetta's damage with her healing, but there would need to be a significant demand for healing to really consider those. The same holds true for pure HP dragons like Unicorn and Jeanne d'Arc. For all current content, it's a bad idea. The one other dragon of note is Shishimai, although its future is uncertain. For a time, Shishimai's buffs affected all 16 units in raids, making it very effective to run one on Odetta in that context. However, it's not currently clear to me whether this was or was not working as intended. Typically, effects that work across team lines specify that they affect all allies or nearby allies, rather than saying that they affect the entire team. Last up for builds, let's go over Wyrmprints. Odetta wants some amount of skill damage to power up her Liberty Slash. The best prints for this are either Resounding Rendition or the Shining Overlord. The extra critical rate on Resounding Rendition is better, unless you plan to shapeshift multiple times in a quest. Since Odetta already has a strength ability and favorable SP costs, her second slot is best used on a 4-strike Wyrmprint. Over an entire match, she'll use a lot of 4-strikes as part of her main combo. Stellar Show's critical damage works fairly well with Resounding Rendition and Cupid. More importantly, that print caps 4-strike damage at 50%. Other 4-strike prints like Fresh Perspective or Sister's Day Out would also work alright, with the latter potentially enabling some fast Mercurial Gauntlet setups. If the content you're focused on features waves of enemies, then Odetta can tap into prints with Slayers and Striker's Strength. Warrior Maiden is great for her, and its recovery potency ability isn't completely wasted, considering it helps with her Freedom Ring. Together We Stand is even better if healing isn't a big concern, since its skill damage can pair with Fresh Perspective to reach the 40% cap. These Wyrmprint builds generally prioritize damage over survival, since most modes in Dragalia Lost emphasize DPS. But if that meta changes, Odetta could potentially lean more into her healing. As with dragon selection, that's probably a bad idea for the time being though. When considering who'd pair well with Odetta, her main limitation is that she plays best in the player's hands. For solo content, you'll want to pilot her if at all possible. The AI won't use her preferred combo of 2 hits into a 4-strike, and in modes where you take no damage, like the Mercurial Gauntlet, it won't use her second skill. Some of the adventurers who might pair well with her in co-op, like Fritz or Beautician Zardan, have great co-abilities for her and also pack defense debuffs, but they don't end up working quite as well in solo, wave-based modes, since they also rely on 4-strikes to be at their full potential. For single player though, plenty of units work well enough alongside her, although none with special synergies. As for Odetta's competition, well, Albert's is her main rival. Alfonse has Curse Res differentiating him, and his 2 attacking skills, while good, are also slightly slower to charge. Albert has higher personal DPS than Odetta does, thanks to the 1-2 combo of his electrifying S2 and his high voltage S1. He's easier than ever to start up in modes of any length, thanks to the Sister's Day Out print. Yet, Odetta's TM buff puts her on par with Albert if you have strong enough teammates and consistently land her S2. The stronger your team, the better she gets. It's not unreasonable for her to surpass Albert in MG in particular, where most units, other than Blades and Albert himself, should remain fairly stationary. Of course, there's another competitor for Odetta and all units, and that's Gala Clio. Thankfully, Odetta is powerful enough that she's still worth including on a light team against the Shadow Gauntlet, since Galacleo will typically replace the weakest link. Odetta, Albert, Halloween Elisanne, and Annalie are among the strongest light DPS, so they're unlikely to get replaced by Galacleo. Furthermore, Galacleo works fine as AI, while Odetta prefers to be controlled by the player. With Flame and Wind month ending soon in the Mercurial Gauntlet, there is a possibility Shadow will appear next, and there's a guarantee it will emerge eventually, if not then. When the time comes, Odetta should serve as a powerful lead adventurer. She's competitive with Albert for those who don't have him, and she's quite possibly better depending on the rest of your team's power. And thankfully, there's no real drawback or issue to running her alongside the must-have Galacleo. This is in slight contrast to Albert, whose Force Strike can easily move him outside of Galacleo's buff radius. Outside that context, Odetta is very good against Shadow IO and some of the less commonly played Void battles. These modes aren't reason to promote someone in an environment where resources like Eldwater are more precious than ever before, but the Mercurial Gauntlet is. I wouldn't invest in Odetta until the time comes that you feel you need her to push your Gauntlet teams forward. But when that does happen, I think she'll be a fantastic adventurer for that mode. And depending on how Curse shakes out, she might even be decent to good for High Zodiarch's trial as well. Another final consideration for Odetta is how future dragons may affect her viability. 90% skill damage power creep is now a real thing thanks to the likes of Shinobi and Siren. If a light skill damage dragon releases, Odetta will suffer in comparison to other light units who rely more heavily on skill damage like Annalie or Halloween Elisanne, especially since Odetta likes to Force Strike. Still, for all practical purposes, this won't matter much since it's unlikely you'll have enough skill damage dragons to use on every single unit. Ultimately, I think Odetta is a standout adventurer. She has a lot of positive characteristics and team utility, yet isn't so scattered as to weaken her gameplay performance. If I had to cite a weakness, it's that her damage and healing ratios aren't the highest on her skills. But thanks to her buffs, debuffs, and overall solid abilities, that doesn't really weigh her down very much. Odetta is the total package. And, well, that's about all I have to say on Odetta. She's a favorite of mine and many of you out there, and with good reason, both from a character and a gameplay standpoint. I'm excited to use her whenever I get the chance to, and hopefully her time to shine will come soon with the next wave of Gauntlet content. Either way, I'd love to know what you think of Odetta in the comments below. Any further thoughts to add or ideas to explore, be sure to let me know. Otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.